Greetings everyone, my name is Anne. Hope you are all doing well. We are going to try and end on a more positive note this year, and I'm going to discuss the best books I read in 2019. I've already discussed the worst books I have read. I will link that somewhere on screen for you guys so you can click if you want to listen to what I thought were some of the worst books that I read. But let's discuss some of the books that really took me by surprise this year. We are going to kick it off with the Nevernight Chronicles because luckily for me, I started in the year that the final book was coming out. So I didn't really have too long to wait to the end of this series. Now, the Nevernight Chronicles centers around Mia Corvero, who is an orphan, and she witnesses the demise of her family. So this book takes us on a journey where she learns to become an assassin, and the first book mainly takes place in her assassin school. So it's her learning the tricks of what should hopefully be her future trade. I said this in my wrap up, can't really remember which wrap up it was. I think it might have been my last one, that I thought this was a very well-rounded series. I enjoyed it from start to finish, and I thought it was just a fantastic read. I really enjoyed the magic system, and I liked the overarching mystery that we had that started from the first book to the last book. And whilst the books did start off with that mystery, I think towards the middle and the end of the book we did sort of get a few more themes that intertwined with, you know, the storyline, which for me was the standout one being family and found families within the series. Now obviously, like with most things, the books do have their drawbacks. I've heard mention of the footnotes being an annoyance for some people. When I first started reading, I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't a fan of the footnotes. I did begin skipping them, but they do offer an insight into the world. They add to the world building of the story. So I think if you do want to get tidbits relating to the overall world of Atreia, then I would read them, but I don't think that they are important to the continuation of the story. So if it's just something that is a big irritation, then perhaps skip them, but I do think they do unfortunately need to be read. After a while though, I did find that I began to notice them a little bit less, and I just got into the habit of reading them when I did read them. I later on began listening to the books on audio. I'm pretty sure the narrator does do the footnotes because his tone tends to change, you know, when he's doing certain things that seem to be a bit out of place in terms of the plot that's going on. I'm not a fan of the narrator in Nevernight. I find his voice to be honestly a little bit irritating, but I power through because I do enjoy this story that much more. But Nevernight is a really fun read because Jay Kristoff has this sort of really fun humour that adds to the story and definitely does give it some flavour. So give it a go if you are looking to get into Nevernight, because the series is now complete. So if you want to marathon, you don't have to wait like the rest of us had to. Next favourite is Deathless by Catherynne M. Valente, and this is one that I honestly did debate putting on this list, mainly because I'm not sure if I had the depth to really understand what I read with this book. Now, I did take some time to mull it over and kind of let everything marinate in my mind. And I have to say, it's just one of those books that it stayed with me for so long after I read it, which is why it's on this list. It was just such a beautifully written story. This is a Russian folklore fairy tale retelling, so it's mixing that with a lot of 1930s Stalin era Russia. And I think with this book, the main reason why I say I don't really feel like I had the depth to really understand it is because I'm not really up to speed on my Russian history, I'm afraid. So a lot of the references and metaphors that had gone into the book, certain characters who were modelled on historical figures, I think a lot of that went over my head. And it wasn't until I went out of my way to, you know, read up a bit more about the book, saw some Goodreads reviews on it that kind of, from people who were experts in this sort of time in history in Russia, and they kind of pointed out this character is meant to be this is meant to symbolize this. And when you realize what, you know, what that is and who those characters are, it just adds a certain layer to the book and makes it a lot more haunting after you finish reading it. Now, because this book is set in war-torn Russia and it is based around a Russian folktale, we do get a lot of beautiful language, and it is, you know, magical realism throughout the book. If that's not your thing, then this book might not be for you, because I think for me, magical realism can be very hit or miss. I kind of like for my magic systems to be more set in stone. I don't really tend to like it if it's kind of magical elements but in a normal world, because I don't really know what the constraints are. But with this being, like I said, a folk tale, you kind of get that idea that it's going to have magic threaded throughout the story. Now, our main character, Maria, she is able to notice the magic that goes on day to day in the world. She can see house elves that scurry around the house. She can talk to them. And she can also see birds in branches that drop to the floor and turn into men. These eventually usually come and whisk away her sisters, and they take them off to go and be married. So she's kind of resigned herself to the fact that this is going to be her life, and one day she doesn't see the bird drop, but the man comes to whisk her away. Now, this is Koshchei, who becomes her husband, and he is the god, the Tsar of life, hence the name of the book, Deathless, because he cannot die. And so our book goes from there as she lives with him, as he has an ongoing war with his brother, who is the Tsar of Death, and it's sort of life and death warring against each other. This book has layers upon layers of things that you can dissect, and it's one of those books I think will be great for me to discuss with someone who has read it, because I know that there's so much that's probably gone over my head. I would say that I would like to reread it, but it kind of left me really down after I finished reading it, because with the themes that it explores, like war and loss and things of that nature, I think it can leave you feeling quite down once you're done reading it. And that was for me anyway, because this essentially isn't a love story. Koshchei and Maria's married life is nowhere near functional. It's quite detrimental to each other. And so it was just quite sad to read about, considering the things she goes through in the book. So yeah, it was one, like I said, that stayed with me. And even though I think I rated it 3.75 stars, or like 4 stars, whatever it was, I think I probably, like I said, would have rated it a bit higher if I did really have a grasp on Russian history, to sort of be able to peel back those layers of the story and really understand what it was that I was reading. But like I said, if you are somebody who does know your Russian history, definitely give this a go. But it doesn't stop those of us who don't have that understanding to enjoy it, because I think on a surface level you can, as long as you can really identify what the themes are. It's something. We have The Bride Test by Helen Hoang, which was a book I absolutely adored. It is book 2 in her romance series. I'm not sure what the name is. I don't know. But book 3 has been pushed back, and I'm very upset about this, because I was really looking forward to the story we're going to get. But in The Bride Test, we have Kai, and his mother is quite frustrated with him because he is still unmarried. So like any Muslim mother would do, she goes back to Vietnam to bring him back a bride. So essentially we are following both characters as their lives have kind of been upturned. Kai is someone who is very set in routine. He is autistic, and so he kind of has his routines that he likes to stick to. He likes things a certain way. And Esme is coming over from Vietnam, and so she is sort of kind of dealing with this sort of culture shock of being in the US, having to learn English, and essentially being a big old fish out of water. And the breakout character for me was Esme. I love Esme so much because she has so much strength. Obviously this was a romance between Kai and Esme, but really we also hear about her struggles, like I said, with being a fish out of water and having to adjust to life in the US. And what I love was that it wasn't the fact that she was this bride that had come over from Vietnam. She also developed her own dreams, and the book went through her trying to achieve those goals and getting back up when she fell down. And so that was just something that an additional bonus for me that I really enjoyed hearing about. Like with most romances, you don't need to read the books in order. I would say I preferred this book to The Kiss Quotient, which was the first book in the series, which is still a really solid book, but this one I think just had more heart and it gave me more the fuzzy feels. Right, we have what was actually my most anticipated read of 2019, which is The Toll by Neal Shusterman. This was one that I was really looking forward to reading, purely because book 2 was on such a cliffhanger. So I actually have a series review with a bit of a spoilery discussion for The Toll. You can click the I if you would like to hear my thoughts on that. But overall, this was a really solid ending to this series. So in this world, which I guess is supposed to be like our distant, very distant future, mankind has been able to solve all of the problems, so you can essentially live forever. So the big problem that they have is overpopulation, and so you have sides who are appointed to glean people in order to keep the population down. But with most things, whenever human beings have power, people misuse it. So we have two factions that have now developed within the sides who are sort of warring with each other, and so it's those two trying to fight for power, and ultimately, you know, what happens in that battle with each other. This was such a well-rounded series, and I think the ending was so very satisfying, because we had a plot point that developed in book 2 that was sort of the underarching mystery throughout this book, and so when we had that payoff, it was just so satisfactory. It's going to be a very bittersweet ending for me, mainly because whilst we had the payoff, I am genuinely going to miss reading about these characters and being in this world, and I think a lot of the things that did take place in this book surprised me, because Neal Shusterman knows how to write twists, and I think there were a few that did take place in this book, but overall a very, very fun read. Like most of his books, towards the end is when everything kicks off and gets really explosive, but all throughout this book I sped through it because I just had to know what happened at the end of this book. Neal Shusterman peppers so much foreshadowing within all of the books that it's definitely one that you're going to have to go back and be like, okay, now I see how we got here, but let's go back and see what was foreshadowed before, because I know so much of it went over my head because it was bits here and there that were in the book. So I'm going to enjoy rereading this book, but I think I'm going to wait a bit toward, you know, before I do that, maybe towards the end of 2020, we'll see. But no, really, really good series. Highly recommend it, give it a go. Lastly, we have probably what was one of my absolute favourites of the year, which was The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This book is a prime example of world building done well. It was absolutely phenomenal, and what I loved was that you just got so engrossed in the world. The way N.K. Jemisin writes the world, you can picture everything going on, and this is what I want from world building when I talk about it. What I liked about N.K. Jemisin's writing in this book is the emotions that she can invoke from you as a reader. And there were so many times where because I felt like the world building was so good in the book and the way she described certain scenarios, it was almost like I could see myself in the place of the characters, which oftentimes meant that I had this really strong emotional response to some of the information that they were being given. I felt myself being upset and angry on their behalf, but I think it's just a testament to her amazingly brilliant writing. So within this world, their Earth is very, very volatile. So every few hundred years, there's a big season, which means that the plates move, things erupt, and you know, things die off, because it's almost like, how I imagined it is almost like when the dinosaurs were killed off. You know, there's a big catastrophic event, and that happens every so often. There are people in this world who are able to control the plates, but within this world they are very downtrodden. So we get a story of people who, you know, are looked down upon, they are oppressed, and that's a big theme that goes on throughout this book, this oppression of these characters, you know, who have the ability to control the plates and do more for this world, but they're not really given that chance to do. We end up following 3 points of view throughout this book, and what I liked is that each character had a very distinct voice. There was never any confusion as to what story you were listening to, but I would say that one of the points of view is written in first person. At first I was very frustrated with it, because it's more like, and you walk out the door and you do this. So at first it was annoying, but then when the next point of view comes in, I think in like the, you know, from the 50th page or so on, it becomes less annoying and you just kind of get used to that. Now, from what I've heard, there's a reason for the first person being part of the story, and it might be in the next few books. I've only read the 5th season. I do plan on continuing on with the series. I just have other books that kind of got in the way of this, but I really do want to finish it. I don't know if I want to reread this book first. I will see, but I might just continue because it is still really fresh in my mind, because the writing was just superb. I will add trigger warnings for child abuse in this book, as I know it's not really mentioned too often, but there are a few instances of that, and literally it's in the blurb. The first instance, that one of the characters, her son is murdered by the father and he kidnaps their daughter. So if that is something that does affect you, then it's also something to be aware of going into the books. Those are all of the books that I really loved this year. I'm hoping that my 2020 will be filled with even more books that I adore, and some to add to my forever favourites. If you enjoyed that video, then please feel free to give it a thumbs up, and also subscribe to my channel if you would like to see more content from me. But that is all. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.